Here we go again.
Yeah.
We both survived our sickness that you can't mention on YouTube, or else they take your advertising dollars away. But you know, some stuff's going on.
I think today we're gonna probably just hang the turbo up for final. Maybe get to the downpipe, but I kind of want to start putting stuff like the alternator on. Maybe we could kind of get some wiring roughed in. Stuff like that today. Tomorrow, I kind of worked on the shifter a little bit. Maybe tomorrow we'll work on the shifter, trying to get the column shifter to work, but I kind of already had some ideas on that and ordered some parts because I do want to leave the stock column shifter. And I think we'll maybe try and do the fuel system this weekend, at least pretty much rough everything in. Did run into a snag with the intake manifold though, because I only have about 7.5 inches of clearance from the cylinder head to the strut tower. And some of the aftermarket intakes are like 8.25 inches or something like that. So that kind of snagged us. But I think we'll be able to work pretty much until we get to that point, and we're in the process of trying to figure that out. So
yeah, the problem with these older Fords, like this dates back to the Mustang, is these shock towers, they aren't even strut towers, they're shock towers, come so far in the engine bay, like even if you have a V8 in them, they suck. Like it's right against the manifold, so there's no room. So we just gotta deal with that. I don't know if there's any Australian cars are even like that. It's probably unique to this thing, I think. It's probably not a normal issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we have to find some super tight intake manifold. He grabbed this alternator from the junkyard. It's from like an early 2000s F-150 or whatever.
Yep. I had to walk around and keep checking because I have an alternator on here, but it doesn't have the holes. It's notched here to slide on at the factory easier. So some of the ones have actually straight up closed holes because we don't want this thing to like fall off. I know it's under tension, so it should be fine, but I got actually one with holes in it. This looks like it was replaced. Funny thing is, there's an option, I guess, when you buy these like replacement, a 6 or 8 rib pulley, 8 rib accessory drive on the F-150, but this is only a 6 rib pulley. Someone was just driving around and the belt somehow didn't fly off.
Yeah, they had an 8 rib belt on a 6 rib pulley. They're just like, yeah, it's fine.
Pretty cool.
But this is a big amp ball. It's like 130 amp or something.
Yeah. I didn't get the Barra alternator shipped with it. Probably might have, should have, but most of the Ford ones will bolt on. You got to put like a spacer on the back. Problem is we have no provisions for. You should support the back of the alternator.
Rear support, because it just hangs off the block on these two things.
We'll probably flux core something for that today. Just a crappy bracket.
But yeah, I'll show you when we pull the other one off what you mean about the notched ones. In a certain year, they notched these holes. I think probably just so they could build them quicker. It's honestly the end of their purpose to it. But yeah, we're going to try and put this on. Well, the nice thing about this is too, is if you had a bare alternator go, you're screwed.
Well, yeah, that was kind of another reason I didn't really care.
And these you can get at every auto parts store in the U.S. because they made about $2 billion in these trucks with like these F-150s and stuff like that.
I got this alternator's replaced, looks fairly new. I got it for $26. So, you know, I can buy, and I can even carry this other one I have as a spare, you know, to get you off the road. So.
But that's the plan for today. I guess we'll see how far we get. Here's what I was talking about. The one we're going to install is the one there on the left with the closed-in ears in the bottom. And then this one's notched. And then when this went on the engines, like this is off something with a Ford 4.6 or 5.4. I actually don't even know how common those are in Australia. And like here, they're in everything. So this is why it's kind of backwards land. But then this bracket holds it to the intake manifold, so it like holds it down so it won't come off. But we don't have that, so it's probably better to use the one with the closed-in ears. There, the truck alternator is in. Fits pretty nice. Corey got some little spacers, you see them up there, to take up the difference in the ears where it goes the block. And then put a little bracket on the back and to support it just so it doesn't snap off. And then ran wiring up here. The charge wire just goes to the solenoid, and then there was one wire that gets battery voltage, so we ran that back to the solenoid again. This is the hot side of the solenoid, it gets constant battery power. And then another one, it said run to the I terminal on the original external regulator, which is this. So the alternator should work on its own then, completely self-sufficient, so hopefully that works.
All right, I guess we're starting to do the wiring today. I guess we decided to go with that. You got the battery alternator wired up. We're gonna do a Terminator X Max. It's like an LS1 kit in this car. I'm assuming it should work because they did unlock like the cylinder settings, and there is an option for 36-1 crank trigger wheels. So this should work on this motor. I mean, I know it's a chance. I modified the harness slightly, but pretty much left everything. I bought an extension harness for the crank and converted it to a Ford crank, so I don't even have to mess with the LS1 crank harness. And I made an extension for the cam. I made a conversion on the cam, and then I wired an igniter box for the factory coils. So technically, I know they don't support, I don't think it supports a 4X style cam gear or something. So I cut 3 teeth off the intake cam, so it's only going to read every, like, there'd be 1 tooth left, and I think it's like 60 or 80 degrees before top dead center, where it passes the, I set the motor at TDC, and I think it's 60 to 80 before it crosses the sensor. But yeah, this kit was cheap because it's already set up for LS stuff, because LS stuff's just dirt cheap right now. And it has trans control for the 480, so that's another reason why I went with it. And it also has a screen, which is cool. I don't have to wire any gauges. I'm going to be using a GM throttle body as GM idle air already set up.
It's going to be a throttle body off an LS, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I might go with the 4-bolt like mechanical one off eBay, but it'll still use a GM idle air. The coolant temp sensor, that will be a GM sensor. I'm converting to, because I think yep, I already figured on that. I had in the water neck outlet, I had a 3/8 older GM one bung welded in, 3/8 MPT. Fuel pressure I'll be using, I already figured on that. I got a transducer for that. So yeah, I mean, it's already has a lot of stuff already as it is, and it comes with a wideband. For $1,200, this thing comes with a wideband, which is, you know, usually at least 200, you know, 150, 200 bucks for one of the cheaper ones. So it already has that. So like,
and it comes with a gauge, a dash.
Yeah, the dash gauge. You know, the dash has a wideband, shows fuel pressure, oil pressure. You know, and the harness was pretty much made. I only had to, you know, like as you can see here, there was 3 wires coming in for the GM crank sensor. I bought an adapter harness and just pulled the last set of wires out and then crimped on a Ford end, because the Ford's just like a VR sensor. It's not a Hall effect where it uses I think it's Hall effect, or it uses the 5-volt
5-volt reference.
5-volt reference. It just uses the magnetic or whatever. So I just removed that. So it's still in the harness here, but it's gone there. And I checked the pin out to make sure. I mean, I'm assuming all this will work. It probably won't work at all, but that's just how it goes.
We're about to start in the fuel system because it's more interesting than the wiring. So, gonna run a surge tank setup, same as the Tempest and the Checker in the trunk. So, unlike those though, he's gonna run external pumps this time. So yeah, it's a different surge tank setup.
Before they sat in the top of the surge, but I figured this one might be easier to plumb. It comes with a Y, and I can put the regulator around the end of the pumps. I'm probably going to return it right back into the gas tank right at the trunk and just run a feed up.
Yeah, there's a filler neck like right behind the nice Granada logo there.
Yeah, so I could just return it right inside the car. But yeah, plus this is 3 liters, which so was the other surge I used before on other cars, but the pumps are sitting in it, so it probably takes up some space in there. So I figure I'll actually have a full 3 liters of surge, because I use like electric carbureted lift pump that's E85 safe for off the stock tank in here. You know, so I figure it holds more fuel. I never really had a problem even with the Tempest. That has a little electric pump and the 2-pump surge with the pumps in here, but I figured I'd try this. Yeah, I ordered the surge separate. It came with the Y. It came with 2 check valves. And then I bought the pumps separate. They were out of the whole kit, so I bought the pumps separate. These are $27 style, like 044 style pumps. So yeah, I've used these before. If they work when they turn on, usually they're good. If they don't work like first time, they're usually junk. But
yeah, for those that don't remember or didn't watch the videos because you didn't care until this point, there's going to be a little carbureted like clickety-clack lift pump.
yeah, this one here.
Yeah, it's going to pump. Yeah, there it is. It's going to pump from the stock fuel tank up into this surge tank, which will be in the trunk. And then from this tank, it's going to be the high pressure EFI pumps that are going to go up to the motor. Are you going to run just one? Or are you going to run them both at once?
No, the second one will be staged. The Holly's going to turn the second one on, probably like a couple pounds of boost, like 2 or 3 pounds of boost. It'll click on.
All that little pump does is it just pumps from the factory, the big fuel tank, into this, and then this just overflows back in the tank again.
Yeah, whatever it doesn't use. And then there'll be a regulator. You'll see, we'll show you when it's all done, but there'll be a regulator at the end of the 2 pumps, regulating the fuel at all times. But I don't usually put the regulator at the front for what I do because I don't usually make a lot of power. Like most stuff I have is under 600 horsepower. Putting the regulator in the trunk is usually fine. So I just run a 1/2-inch feed up and call it a day. So
that's what we're going to do, is just blast some holes in the trunk now.
the trunk looked pretty nice till I noticed the inner fender's about to fall off. Or
yeah, it has no fender.
Yeah, but at least the trunk floor is still good.
Just got to move the surge tank in a little bit so it doesn't fall through.
Yeah. Then put one in here and put the ground on right away, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Man, look at that.
That's nice stuff.
Fire extinguisher bracket, electrical box cover, bolted right up to the rear frame rail. Sweet. Cool. Pretty sturdy. Man, that's nice. Too nice.
Got our bag of carbureted fuel filters here.
Hell of a good pilot. .7/16.
You might not have gotten it big enough.
Probably should have drilled a 1/4-inch hole, then punched it. It just tightens at the end, so I tape it and RTV it. You don't want to get too nuts on this.
Yeah, there's not much metal there.
I'm happy with that. It should be fine, right?
Yeah. Make sure it doesn't rotate or anything, though. Nice.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
We got about as far as we can go on the fuel system right now. Turns out these pumps, the bottom fitting, they came with these 10AN, and the 8AN adapters Corey got won't thread in. It's a different thread in the bottom of these for some reason. So he's just going to order an adapter for down there and just go with the 10. So we can't reassemble these. But these are going to go, 2 of them like that into the Y. But in the meantime, put the regulator on it, have the feed in the car done off the regulator here, through the floor that goes up to the engine bay. This is the return, goes back into the surge tank. And then this one with the plastic filter in it, this is the feed from the lift pump under the car, that little clickety-clack pump. And then this is the overflow. So when the surge tank fills up, it'll go into this hose and then back into the filler neck right here. And that's actually where you put the fuel in the car. So that just goes right back down into the tank. So there's not really any pressure in this hose or this hose, because it's just filling this tank and then overflowing. All the pressure is made by these pumps up to the engine. And here's the lift pump. Corey installed using a fire extinguisher bracket and then a receptacle box cover. So this hose goes up into the trunk. This one's the inlet. It's going to go right here to the bottom of the fuel tank. That's where the factory feed was up to the original engine. Just comes at the bottom of the tank there. So this one will feed the surge tank. So since we got halted working on the fuel system, we're going to throw the starter in it. This starter came with the trans adapter from Castlemaine Rod Shop, as shown there. To me, it just looks like a Nippon Denso starter, like from a Japanese car, like a Toyota or something. I know they use them here in Chryslers too, on Caravans, probably a lot of vehicles. It doesn't look to me like they made this nose part. That looks to be the same kind of casting as the rest of the starter. So I'm kind of curious what this is off. It's probably off some kind of factory application. It'd be nice to know in case this goes bad. Battery setup is pretty much done and wired. The important stuff's hooked up, the ECM feeds and stuff. The starter's in back there and wired up, the trigger wire and the power wire. Just plugged the crank sensor in down there, and the cam sensor back there, and hoping to fire up the ECU here and see if it picks up the crank and cam reference and syncs properly. Because if so, then that's like the major hurdle with getting this Holly to run. If that works, then should be home free. Plus we get to test crank the engine. So what just happened was we got crank and cam sync. So it's picking it up in the ECU and it's picking up RPM. So that'll actually work.
Yeah,
and
so
that was the big hurdle. Like if that works, then everything else will work.
It should work, but I wired a igniter box because I'm pretty sure this Terminator X doesn't really, it only wants you to use smart coils, and these factory coil packs use, like the Ford Barra ones use they have an igniter, I guess, in the ECU or some sort of separate box to run the coils. So I had to wire an igniter box, which converts the 5-volt signal from the ECU to run the coil, because these coils just see a 12-volt. That's what they see, I believe.
Yeah, 12-volt just fires them.
They get a constant 12, and they get fired with a ground. That's how they work. Like they'll get a key on 12-volt, and they get fired with a ground. Where a smart coil gets fired with a 5-volt.
It has constant 12-volt and ground.
Yep. So
5-volt
this box should hopefully work. I didn't use a Holly box. I just tapped. I used an extension. I used a coil extension harness, 2 LS coil extension harness, but only used 6 of the signals out of it.
Yeah, we didn't mention that earlier. This is an LS harness, and he's just not going to use 2 injector plugs and two coil plugs, or 2 coil circuits, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
So it's a computer that was originally designed for an LS, but now it's universal now.
It's getting more.
Yeah, they opened up more options.
And they're going to keep unlocking stuff eventually, I think, more stuff, because it's Holly. They're going to use this for other things. But I'm using an LS throttle body, so and an LS idle air motor, so I knew that would work.
Most of the sensors that aren't in the motor are going to be LS sensors, or GM sensors, which are all the same anyway.
GM coolant temp, GM map. The coolant temp is going to work. It already has an oil pressure, fuel pressure plug, so I'm going to wire those into transducers. So like, I really didn't modify the harness much. Yeah, it might look like a little crappy on the motor. I'm going to try and tuck up a lot of it's too long, but it'll be tucked underneath the intake. So
right now, as long as it fires these
spark plugs,
if it fires the plugs and we have spark, then basically like we're really golden with this.
I plugged 2 coils in. We don't have fuel injectors today. I know they're going to work. If the coils work, the fuel injector is definitely going to fire. So I'm not worried about that. Yeah, let's see if we get spark. No spark.
No spark.
All right.
Okay, we're trying it again with the coil harness plugged in.
The box will probably melt, the igniter box. Go ahead.
Yep.
Yeah, getting spark. Pretty good spark too.
This one's not, but it wasn't grounded on anything, so. Okay, so that's all for today. So the ECU having crank and cam sync is good. That pretty much means that this is set. Like no reason it shouldn't run. Especially that it has spark. If it has spark, it's going to fire the fuel the same way. So everything else will just be kind of tweaking with it and it'll be good. Biggest hurdle we have now is the intake manifold. Still don't have one. It's not much room. It's only about 7 inches from the cylinder head to that shock tower. It is just a shock tower on this. There's no strut in this. It still has a coil spring set up. But every intake that we try is too wide, or at least that Corey gets measurements on. He's contacted a few places in Australia to get dimensions, and seems like no one really has anything yet. He's still trying. He's trying not to spend his entire kid's like college fund on this, but if it is what it is. But yeah, that's the last thing yet. So have to get those fuel fittings, and then the fuel system will be good to go, but it still has no intake to go to. The turbo stuff's done. Just got to hook up the rest of the sensors, but can't put fuel injectors in without an intake, can't run the fuel line up without an intake, can't restart it without an intake. So that's what we're waiting on. That's the biggest hurdle. So might work on it next weekend. If not, it'll be 2 weeks again, but it's actually pretty close to starting.